Hi students, this is lesson 4.3, Congruent Triangles, and this is Ms. Oberly, and today by the end of this lesson you should be able to name corresponding parts of congruent triangles and use CP-CTC, which is a theorem that says corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, to find missing sides or missing angles. Okay, so we're going to start with a definition of congruent polygons. Two polygons are congruent if and only if their corresponding parts are congruent. So what that means for us is that corresponding angles, for example, angle A and angle H, which are congruent. So we can mark that with two curved marks. Angle B and angle J are also congruent, so we can mark them both with one curved angle mark. And angle C is congruent to angle K, so we can mark those both with three congruent marks. Same with corresponding sides. So we mark corresponding sides with the same number of tick marks. So side AB is congruent to side HJ, and we mark that with one tick mark, and so on. Also going a little bit further with that, so if triangle BCA is congruent to triangle JKL, that means that angle B is congruent to J, angle C is congruent to K, angle A is congruent to H. So we put them in those corresponding orders so that corresponding parts of the congruent triangles line up. So if you look at this setup over here, you can see that that is incorrect. That's incorrect because the corresponding parts are not in the correct order. So if B is congruent to J, J should be second in order. All right, for this lesson we're just going to do one example. Please draw this diagram in your notes. And for this example, we know that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DFE. So we can actually mark in that our corresponding parts of these congruent triangles are actually congruent. So A is congruent to D, so I'm going to give them both one curve. We also know that B is congruent to F, so we can give them both two marks, and we know that C is congruent to E. So I'm going to give them both 3 marks. And with those angles being marked in, we can then identify which sides are congruent. For example, DE is between 1 and 3 tick marks, and so is AC, so those are congruent. We also can see that EF is between 3 and 2 tick marks, and so is CB. So those two sides are congruent, which means the remaining side, DF, is congruent to AB. So I'm going to give them both 3 tick marks. Given that information, we can go through and identify angles that are congruent and use that information to write equations. Once you're able to write equations, I know you all are pros at solving at this point. The solving part goes really easily. So knowing that the measure of angle F is congruent to the measure of angle B, we know that Y equals 13. And the same thing is true by the corresponding parts of congruent triangles theorem. We can say that FE is congruent to BC, just like we said in the picture. Here's FE and here's BC. They are congruent, so we can therefore set up this equation and substitute what we just found for Y and solve for X. So X equals 12.4.